Welcome to Fringe Pop 321, the show that believes the world is stranger than we think, but thinking should not be strange. Ever remember playing with one of these, maybe as a kid, maybe as an adult? You might ask, well, why are you saying these? You're only holding one thing. That's because we're not holding just one thing. We have dolls inside of dolls. These are called Matreshka dolls, otherwise known as nesting dolls. Now, why in the world would I bring this up? What's the point? It's because they relate to something we're going to talk about today. They actually illustrate an important point for thinking well about an idea you'll find on the internet. And I'm not talking about haunted dolls today. You know, the kind that you put in the microwave to kill them off. You know, we all know that doesn't work. Instead, the question we're going to talk about today is whether there are tombs of giants in ancient Egypt. Don't see the relationship? Well, keep watching. Not too long ago, a massive stone sarcophagus was discovered in Egypt, in the city of Alexandria. It dates to the Ptolemaic period, which is roughly 332 to 30 BC. Now, this discovery led to a new wave of claims that Egypt is home to ancient tombs of giants. You might ask, why? Why would people think that? Well, it's because the sarcophagus that was discovered in Alexandria measured 8.6 feet in length. Consequently, the announcement was followed by numerous video and blog posts about how the sarcophagus was yet another tomb of a giant, Nephilim, who had lived in ancient Egypt. When it was opened, yep, you guessed it, no giant. Rather, there were the skeletal remains of 3 normal-sized people inside. But if that's the case, why did people still think, and why do they still think, that sarcophagi like this is evidence for giants in ancient Egypt? Well, the answer is still the size, 8.6 feet long. People presume that the original occupant must have been a giant because of the length. There are many such sarcophagi in ancient Egypt, and to date, there have been no giants inside. But the idea still persists. Why? I mean, why, with evidence to the contrary and pretty much a poor track record of finding any giant skeletal remains in one of these things, why is this still something you will see so much of and hear so much of on the internet? Well, for starters, amateur researchers whose work is found on the internet are fond of quoting the eminent Egyptologist and archaeologist Flinders Petrie as evidence for their interpretation of these sarcophagi. In one archaeological report, Petrie wrote that the pharaoh Khasa Khemui was 5 cubits and 3 palms high, which would be about 8 English feet. Now that's pretty tall if Petrie was right, and if we should take Petrie at his word, or as we'll see, somebody else at their word. A second line of evidence for giants in ancient Egypt is the fact that there are even larger sarcophagi known from ancient Egypt than the one recently discovered in Alexandria, which, as you recall, was 8.6 feet in length. There are several Serapia, the singular is Serapeums, in Egypt where you can find sarcophagi twice the size of that example that just came from Alexandria. Now, a Serapeum is a temple dedicated to the Greco-Egyptian deity Serapis. And the sarcophagi there, as I just noted, are immense. They are truly gigantic. It's no surprise that some would think giants were buried in them at one time. A third line of argumentation is the way pharaohs are portrayed in Egyptian art. There are many examples of pharaohs being depicted as much larger than their subjects. A well-known example is the carving of Ramses II in his chariot at the Battle of Kadesh. If you actually look at this carving, he is clearly larger than the other people depicted in the picture. So what do we make of all this? Well, let's look at all 3 lines of argument. When it comes to the Petrie quotation, it must be pointed out that Petrie was actually quoting an ancient source, Manetho. Now that produces some problems. Manetho lived in the Ptolemaic era, thousands of years after Casa Khemui, the referent of his comment. There's no telling where Manetho got this measurement. There are no contemporary sources about this pharaoh's height being so tall. In fact, we don't have any contemporary sources from that pharaoh's era at all. Nor has his mummy ever been found or his sarcophagus. So basically, we really don't have much to go on here. What about the immense sarcophagi at the Serapeum and other similar temples? Well, they're huge because they are sarcophagi not of humans, but of bulls, specifically the sacred Apis bulls. Internet researchers deliberately mislead the public in this regard. They contend that no bull was ever found in any one of the sarcophagi from the Serapeum, and really from any Serapeum at all, and they therefore argue there's no evidence of Apis bull embalming. Both of those claims are flatly wrong. The cult of the Apis bull is well known in Egyptology. There is in fact a papyrus from ancient Egypt that described the procedure for embalming the Apis bull. That papyrus is P. Vindab 3873. It's been published and was the subject of a detailed 1992 dissertation, which has also been published. In 1851, Auguste Mariette discovered an intact burial of an Apis bull at Memphis. As one mummy specialist, Christine Elmadi, notes, quote, "The complex dates only to the time of Ramses II, but we know of burials long before this time. Undoubtedly, several more Serapeums await discovery," unquote. Now, sarcophagus size in general is quite misleading. Remember how we began this episode with the nesting dolls? It turns out that sarcophagi are just the outer burial vessel for pharaohs. They just happen to be the biggest nesting sarcophagi, nesting coffin that was used. They are the outer ones, the biggest. You work your way down to the smaller actual coffin of the occupant. The smallest part, the actual coffin, is where that you would get an individual's height from, not the outer layer. The best example of how a sarcophagus can totally mislead someone when it comes to the height of who's inside is, believe it or not, King Tut. His tomb, remember, was completely intact. The sarcophagus of Tut, the outer vessel, measured 8.25 feet, a few inches from the recent one discovered in Alexandria. But the king, again, we have his mummy, the king was only 5 feet 10 inches tall. It's been measured. Lastly, the artistic depiction of pharaohs as gigantic is also not about literal size. Remember the picture of Ramses II that we looked at from Kadesh? Well, guess what? We have his mummy too. He was 5 feet 7, 170 centimeters. The average height of pharaohs in all periods of ancient Egypt was in the mid 160 centimeter range, yet they are drawn regularly as much larger than life, and quite a bit larger than they really were. This is an honorific technique. To make the pharaoh bigger in Egyptian art is a way to glorify him as being better or superior to the rest of the people in a piece of art. The notion that a race of giants roamed ancient Egypt and are buried in complexes and tombs throughout Egypt is a modern myth. Now, ancient Egypt would have been like any other culture, even today. You're going to have individuals that are unusually tall. We would expect that. But as far as the claim, again, that these great gigantic tombs and sarcophagi are evidence of the burial of giants in some sort of primeval age is just simply not the case. There are no data from primary sources that support the idea, whether that's sarcophagi, artwork, or mummies, or textual evidence. Absolutely zero. Thanks for watching Fringe Pop 321. Please come back to our YouTube channel and watch other episodes and visit our website. Every episode we do gets a companion web page on our website. And if you'd like to support what we're doing at Fringe Pop, please visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/FringePop321. And remember, what you know may not be so.